So what we're going to do next is add materials to each of the 3D objects that we've made to make this house. So before we begin, a material is actually what an object needs in order to give it color. That's why by default, every object here is set to default material. Without a material, it's going to look green or purplish tint or violet tint, meaning that there's no material assigned to it and either it's missing. So let's go ahead and create a material over here. First, let's create a folder for it and name it materials. And then right click the materials folder, go to create, and create your first material. Let's go ahead and name it ground. Alright, so before we use this, in order to change the color, we would have to go to the inspector in order to modify the parameters for the ground material. And in order to modify the color, we just have to go to albedo under main maps. Basically, albedo is the main color or the main texture of the material. So first, let's assign it to the ground over here by dragging and dropping. You can drag and drop it here, or you can drag and drop it on top of ground in hierarchy. Alright, so now that it's assigned, let's go ahead and change the color. So I'm just going to turn it green. Alright, so that's our ground. Now there are other things that you can modify in the materials section in the inspector. So right now it's pretty shiny. That's because by default the smoothness is set to 0.5. If you set it to 0.1, you'll maximize the reflection. At the moment you can only see the sun's reflection, but later on we'll add a sky and we'll show you what it looks like when you maximize smoothness with a sky reflection. Now if we increase the metallic, it's gonna look more metally, or it's gonna give off a metal sort of material or look. But since this is the ground, we're not gonna need a metallic look, and we can actually adjust the smoothness a little bit so that it doesn't have too much reflection. Alright, that's great. So we can go ahead and create more materials and assign them to the other blocks. So let's make one for the foundation, or floor if you want to name it that way, it's totally fine. One for the wall, one for the roof, and then there's one more for the roof edges or something. I'll just call it roof edges. Or roof, yeah, here we go. Alright, so first things first, you can actually modify each material before dragging and dropping or applying it to the materials or the 3D objects. So let's see, what can I do with this? Alright, so let's get the color to foundation. Actually, I have no idea what I'm gonna choose for the colors. I'll just make it random. You guys can choose whatever you want. I'll just make this a dark gray. So this is actually very similar to most other 3D modeling applications where material does play a huge part in coloring and texturizing. Regarding texturizing, we'll be moving on to that soon. Let's make this a darker shade of gray, and the roofed edges, I'll just make them brown or something. So yeah, that's pretty simple for now. the next thing we're going to be doing is creating a skybox to replace the gray area over here. Now in order to do that, it's pretty easy. All you gotta do is to create a new material and switch its shaders to skybox mode. Now it sounds confusing, but it's actually pretty easy. So let's go ahead and create a new material and call it sky. Alright, now with sky selected, in the inspector you see that there are no options currently in order to make it a skybox. That's because the shader is set to standard by default. So let's go ahead and set it to panoramic or procedural. So let's just go with procedural since we don't have a photo reference. Alright, so after we've set it to a skybox, we gotta drag and drop it into the empty gray area. Now it's already been dropped on my end. You can't see it because it's currently turned off. I mean, the skybox and the other fog effects have been turned off. So in order to turn it back on, all you gotta do is click this right here. Alright, now we can see the skybox. And now that we have view of the skybox, you can also modify its parameters over here on this inspector. Let's see, there's the sun. So this is to adjust the sun size, the convergence, as well as the thickness of the atmosphere. You can also actually change the sky tint and its ground as well. So let's say sky tint isn't noticeably because it's set to gray by default. Let's try to adjust the thickness a bit. And as you can see, as we adjust the thickness and change the skybox's parameters, the global lighting of the scene changes as well. This is actually very useful when you want to achieve some sort of day or night cycle or day time graphics and stuff. Alright, let's set this back to default. Alright, and sometimes you may not be able to see certain areas of your 3D model or your world. So if you ever have an issue like that, you can always toggle the lighting off using this button right here, and you should see everything in plain color. Alright, so that's it for materials and skyboxes. Now what we're going to move on to next is to apply textures to this area that we've already created.